The title of my presentation this afternoon is Muslim Women's Gendered Identities in the Digital Age, which fits very nicely with the series subject matter or title, which is Islam in Digital Spaces. And about this topic, it is very important to provide an overview of the plethora of online activities which different generations of Muslim women from around the world, representing varying interests, ideologies, religious orientations, and backgrounds engage in. They do so through participation in a wide array of gendered online communities, activities, and initiatives. That's why I chose this particular topic. And really, this is based on some of my own qualitative feminist studies, which relies on a critical analysis of a number of Muslim women's online groups and campaigns. I examined their goals and objectives by spotlighting examples from the posts of some of these groups and contextualizing the depicted discourses within broader transnational social, political, and religious frameworks. The analysis reveals three main functions under which these various activities could be classified, namely exercising resistance, expressing identities, and extending solidarity and support. So the presentation is going to really focus on these three different functions: resistance, expression of identity, and extending solidarity and support. Why is that important? The changing political landscape, especially after 9/11, and more recently, of course, during former President Trump's presidency, led to a surge in Islamophobia, which is commonly defined as an irrational, exaggerated fear of Islam and Muslims and the Muslim way of life. And this resulted in the spread of negative stereotypes, misconceptions, and misrepresentations about Islam and Muslims, which necessitates hearing Muslims' voices and listening to their own narratives in their own words. In other words, as we say in ethnography and qualitative research, giving voice to the voiceless. This is especially true for Muslim women who suffer from three layers of invisibility in academia, in the media, and in everyday life. So I always argue that women in general, Muslim women in particular, are in many cases marginalized and invisible in academic literature, in media representation or misrepresentation, and in everyday socioeconomic discourses and spaces, which necessitates hearing their own voices and shedding light on their own complex identities and lived experiences. A short note on self-reflexivity also, why I chose this particular topic. I myself am an Arab American Muslim woman who is also a mother, an academic, and somebody who has been studying Arab and Muslim media and also women's identities and gendered identities. So this topic is very much dear and near to my heart. Also, we have the changing media landscape. New media-enabled platforms for individual and collective expression away from governmental controlled spaces. In other words, we have the rise of the phenomena of citizen journalism, where average people could have their own voices heard and amplified outside of the state-constrained or controlled spaces. The rise of the concept of digital ummah or the virtual ummah in cyberspace. The internet as a transformative technology has bridged geographical barriers among many Muslims, allowing a wider range of voices to enter the public sphere and to articulate different understandings of Islam, reflecting multiple collective identities and complex realities. However, very little research has been conducted on mainstream Islamic websites, deliberations, and discourses. Rather, most of the literature and the research has focused on the so-called quote-unquote extremist websites or terrorism studies, rather than studying the moderate or mainstream websites which reflect everyday experiences and identities for average Muslims. That was the reason why myself and my co-author Muhammad al-Nawawi have written the book Islam.com, Contemporary Islamic Discourses in Cyberspace, which was my first book. And the reason we wrote this particular book is specifically because we wanted to shed light on these mundane, mainstream, everyday experiences of Muslims who actually interact with each other, as well as with non-Muslims in digital spaces through different online websites. And of course, the concept of the digital ummah or the ummah in digital sphere became one of the main topics and issues we talked about in this particular book. Now let's talk about the first function. We mentioned the three different functions. The first one is exercising resistance online, raising voices, and pushing boundaries. Muslim women globally use the internet not just as a window to see the rest of the world while being seen by the rest of the world, but also as a tool or even a weapon to fight back against the many attempts to sideline them, profile them, stigmatize them, marginalize them, and silence them. And this created a new form of Islamic feminism. So the concept of Islamic feminism is something which is very much at the heart of my own research. I believe it is very possible to create a bridge between Islamic values and feminism without necessarily adopting the quote-unquote the Western notion of feminism, and we can talk about that in the discussion. I believe that Muslim women today are using digital media and social media to create their own brand of Islamic feminism. Their efforts to deploy digital media as a platform that gives voice to the voiceless was clearly evident in the three functions of education, documentation, and mobilization, which many women exercised in the midst of the Arab Spring uprisings through engaging in cyber activism and the sister phenomena of cyber feminism, which refers to how women in particular use social media and digital media in order to advance social and political issues of importance and relevance to themselves, including calling for human rights and calling for women's rights as well. And that became very, very obvious in the midst of the Arab Spring moment. Here is one image for a woman, in this case, an Egyptian woman in the midst of the Egyptian uprising, in the midst of the Arab Spring, exercising her own activism on the street. And there are so many other examples. I think many of you know about Tawakkul Karman, the Yemeni activist and journalist who became known as the mother of the revolution in Yemen and was the first Arab woman to receive the Nobel Prize as a nod for women's activism and involvement in the Arab Spring. A lot of this activism has used also social media and digital media as tools for resistance and activism. Other examples of exercising resistance online has been the campaign #CanYouHearUsNow. Maybe some of you heard about this particular campaign. That campaign started online by a group of Muslim women as a response to candidate Donald Trump in 2016 in the second presidential election, in the second presidential debate, when he was actually asked by one of the audience members, who happened to be a young Muslim woman. She asked him, so what are you going to be doing to solve the problem of Islamophobia in America if you become the elected president? And instead of addressing this particular issue, he responded with a very misogynist, and very, Islamophobic answer. He said, oh, it's about Muslims themselves who have to really, report anything they see in the news. If they see anything which is different in their own communities, if they see something which is fishy going on, they have to respond to it and report it. And also, he mentioned the case of Mrs. Ghazala Khan, the wife of Mr. Khizr Khan, how she was standing on stage in the midst of the Democratic National Convention, and she was silent while her husband was speaking. And he said, oh, maybe she was silenced. Maybe she was not even allowed to talk. So in response to that, a group of Muslim women from a group called Karama, and the word Karama, as some of you, I'm sure, know Arabic, or many of you know Arabic. It is called, Karama means dignity in Arabic. So it started with the group Karama. This is a screenshot from one of their campaigns, #CanYouHearUsNow. They took to Twitter in order to express their own resistances and to raise their own voices. And many of them started to have very interesting tweets like, I'm a professor. When I walk in the classroom, I'm the only woman and the only person who is allowed to talk. #CanYouHearUsNow. So they started to push back against this narrative of the silenced, /oppressed, repressed Muslim woman by expressing clearly their own identities online. And through this online campaign, #CanYouHearUsNow, really reveal their own identities and their own subjectivities. There was also other tweets from other, women in this particular campaign. For example, the American Muslim activist Hind Makki commented on a photo of 80 American Muslim women speaking in ISNA, the Islamic Society of North America convention. And she said, check out all of these Muslim women speakers, not silent, at a major American Muslim conference. #CanYouHearUsNow, right? So they started to push back against the narrative of the sexist, misogynist, Islamophobic narrative of Muslim women are silent by really raising their own voices using digital media and new media as part of this campaign, #CanYouHearUsNow. Another example of Muslim women's resistance online has been the campaign #HandsOffByHijab. That was another very clear example of Muslim women's strategic use of digital media. In this case, it was resistance to France's 2021 decision to ban girls under 18 from wearing the hijab or the Islamic headscarf, and to ban the mothers from accompanying, the mothers who are wearing the hijab, from accompanying their own children on school trips. So some group of Muslim women started this campaign, hashtag hands off my hijab, to resist all of that. And they started to say France has a history of banning hijab, niqab, which is of course the face veil, the burkini, which is the modest Islamic swimwear. And they started to comment on all of that online. For example, the activist and organizer Linda Sarsour, who is a Palestinian American, she tweeted online, "I need all the folks that express anger and outrage at Iran for forcing Muslim women to wear the hijab to express the same degree of outrage at France for banning girls to wear the hijab." And really, this should be a moment of calling for, quote unquote, human rights and women's rights. And of course, Linda Sarsour is just one among many. And that is one image from this particular campaign, hashtag hands off my hijab. If you try to Google it, you will find many other images. And of course, one thing I would like to touch upon in the discussion is a very, interesting moment we are living, where I find a lot of media attention, a lot of academic attention to the campaign, Hair for Freedom and Women Life Freedom, which erupted in Iran in response to Mahsa Amini's tragic death at the hands of the so-called, quote unquote, Islamic morality police, because she was not wearing what they perceived to be a decent enough or conservative enough hijab. Of course, it's a tragic thing, and I'm very much against, asking a woman to wear or not to wear anything, or imposing on her something that she does not want to do. But it's very interesting to compare and contrast the visibility that this particular campaign, Women, Life, Freedom, and Hair for Freedom, received, compared to, for example, the hashtag hands off my hijab and other campaigns that were really resisting France's hijab ban and niqab ban. That's an interesting discussion to have, because why did this one receive so much attention and the other one did not? That is something to discuss and talk about more in our Q&A possibly. So there were other similar comments from American Muslim women who also criticized what they perceived as the French, quote unquote, hypocrisy and double standards. Of course, France has this, égalité, liberté, fraternité, which like equality, liberty, and justice. And they said, how is that possible to raise these kinds of slogans, but to have so many double standards and not to give these Muslim women the choice and the ability to wear the hijab if they choose to do so? And really what we are seeing here is the third space was created through various social media platforms that provides an ideal arena of contestation where the tug of war and push and pull mechanisms can be exercised, amplified, and proliferated to a diverse transnational audience, where women are really using many of these spaces, like we said, in order to reach not just a local audience or a regional audience, but actually an international global audience, and to exercise their own agency, and to exercise their own resistance and raise their own voices. So now we finished the discussion of the first type of usage of digital spaces by modern Muslim women, which is resistance and pushing boundaries. And we move now to the second function, which is expressing diverse identities, blending tradition and modernity. Right? So how they actually cross the borders or the line between what they perceive as tradition, what they perceive as modernity, and how they express diverse identities online. One interesting phenomena is the phenomena of fashionista, which is one of my favorite terms. Really, it blends the two terms. There is the term hijabista, which blends the two terms, fashionista, which is a fashion icon and role model who is trying to use the internet in order to be very stylish, and the term hijabi, which means a woman who is actually wearing the Islamic headscarf. So there was this blended or hybrid term hijabista, which blends the two terms, the fashionista, the fashion icon and role model for being stylish online, and the term hijabi, or the woman who wears the Islamic headscarf. Some Muslim women, social media influencers, today have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of followers online, a vast audience of mostly young Muslim women who interact on platforms such as Twitter, Snapchat, YouTube, and Instagram. And this is certainly true in the case of these fashion public opinion leaders and fashion agenda setters who became role models for other young Muslim women. So these, very technologically savvy, smart, young Muslim women said, hey, wait a minute, I can wear the hijab, but I can still look attractive and I can still be very stylish. I can even be a fashion role model online. Of course, as you can imagine, despite the glamour and wide appeal and lucrative economic rewards of this new trend of the hijabistas, it is not a one-size-fits-all, and it actually created some controversies and tensions. Not everybody liked it, right? So it triggered a lot of hybrid and mixed reactions from diverse Muslim communities online, depending on gender, generation, religious orientation, and geographic location, among other factors. The younger, more cosmopolitan female internet users in the diaspora mostly expressed admiration and fascination. They said, wow, this is very cool. You can be a hijabi, you can be a modestly dressed, a woman, a Muslim woman, and at the same time, you can be stylish, you can be very elegant, and so on. By contrast, some of the older, more conservative, religiously orthodox internet users, especially those outside of the Western world, criticized this particular phenomena, and many of them said, hey, how could that even be Islamic? Their dress is not very conservative, it's not modest enough, and they started to really kind of criticize them for this particular type of stylish dress online. Another very interesting thing as well is the hijabi doll and emoji. Of course, the Barbie movie has been released in the cinemas and theaters, and it created a lot of controversies. Not everybody liked the Barbie doll, and not everybody liked the Barbie movie. And a lot of people were like, hey, what is happening here? This is a type of westernization, a type of sexualization that we do not accept in our part of the world. That's why it was not welcomed in some countries. I think Kuwait and other countries did not allow it to be displayed or shown in movie theaters. There was this young Muslim woman, even before the Barbie movie was released, who was not very happy with the Barbie doll and the Barbie emoji. And she said, hey, wait a minute, this is a Western type of sexualization, which does not have to be one size fits all. We don't have to globally, internationally endorse Barbie as the model of the modern woman. How about having a hijabi, which means a young, Muslim woman wearing a hijab and becoming a famous doll and a famous emoji online? And what you see here is an image of this young woman who came up with this hijabi doll and hijabi emoji side by side with the emoji which she helped create, celebrating her own graduation from college. So I find this to be also an interesting thing that needs to be highlighted, how digital spaces are being used not just to express identity, but also to show this kind of hybridity and this kind of blend between modernity and tradition in visually interesting ways. Another interesting concept is the concept of the digital niqabosphere by Dr. Anna Piella. I believe she was the first speaker in this series. And she really came up with this interesting term of digital niqabosphere for women who decide to wear the niqab or the Islamic face veil, and how they're starting to use certain social media platforms like Instagram, Reddit, TikTok, YouTube, Flickr, Facebook, and others to try to also say, we are here. Our faces may not be visible to you because we are wearing the niqab or the face veil, but our identity should also be equally seen in digital spaces. So I really like the term digital niqabosphere, and I included it in my presentation for that reason. Also, Anna Piella mentioned this very interesting phenomena of the young lady, Rifqa Sajida, in one of her studies. And really, Rifqa Sajida is a very clear example of this type of crossover or hybridity that we have been talking about. She describes herself on her own social media platforms, including her own YouTube channel, and that's a screenshot from her own YouTube channel. She describes herself as a young convert from Judaism to Islam who is disabled, queer, and Orthodox Salafi Muslim. I don't know if it can get more hybrid than that, right? That's a clearly very, very hybrid identity that she is expressing online. And she has many followers on her YouTube channel and other social media platforms. And she is also a niqabi, as you can clearly see in the image. She wears the niqab herself. So that's, again, another interesting example of this kind of hybridity of Muslim women's identities online. Also, there was the interesting, hashtag Muslim Women's Day, which was released by the young American Muslim woman, Amani Al-Khatatba, the founder of Muslim Girl magazine. I believe the second speaker in this series, Dr. Kristen Peterson, talked about the Muslim Girl magazine in her own presentation. So this young lady, Amani Al-Khatatba, she created this Muslim Girl magazine in response to the Muslim travel ban. And also she started to have this event, hashtag Muslim Women's Day, to respond to the Muslim travel ban and to also amplify Muslim women's voices and to boost their own visibility and to make sure that they fight any kind of obscurity or misrepresentation or silencing or marginalization. And it became viral also online, reflecting so many different narratives and so many different voices and identities for young Muslim women. So that's Amani al-Khatatba, and that's the cover of the Muslim Girl, coming of age magazine that she helped create. And she herself is a very controversial hybrid figure, because while describing herself as a modern Muslim woman who is technologically savvy and educated and living in the West, she is also at the same time a subject of controversy, because some people admire her work, admire her efforts, admire the Muslim Girl magazine, but not everybody shares this position. There are others who think, oh, she is not conservative or traditional or modest enough, and things like that. So again, just like the concept of hijabista, we also see some kind of controversies here around Amani al-Khatatba and Muslim Girl magazine. And the hashtag Muslim Women's Day became an opportunity for women to express their own crossover between, Islam and feminism, as they actually understand it in their own terms. Like we talked about the concept of Islamic feminism. They used this hashtag Muslim Women's Day opportunity online to really kind of amplify their own voices and speak in their own voices. So one woman, for example, tweeted, I encourage you to speak to a Muslim woman. She's talking to the Western world or the rest of the world, and understand where we come from and our own beliefs, not the lies that the media and false sources like to give you. It is our narrative. And other women tweeted similar messages like, our narratives, our voices, you have to know us in our own words and our own voices. And some of them said, Muslim women do not need any saving. So she's trying to really counter the infamous notion of save the Muslim woman syndrome. Save the Muslim woman syndrome is when you hear, for example, some Western scholars or feminist scholars say, oh, so what can we do in order to save the women in Afghanistan, right? So that's called the save the Muslim woman syndrome. And these women are pushing back against that and saying, we have our own identity, we have our own agency. Thank you so much, but we don't need saving. Maybe we need to be respected, we need to be understood, we need to be heard, but we don't need to be saved. So that's a very strong message that came across as well as part of this campaign. And also Muslim Women's Day global campaign was launched under the theme of healing, resilience, and renewal in the year 2021 to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and its different effects and implications. So in that particular year, a digital summit was launched online to try to bring together different celebrities, influencers, public figures and activists, and many different people from different backgrounds to show an act of solidarity and support. And that shows really that these social media platforms could be used for heterogeneous, different types of activities. Some of it is resistance, some of it is hybridization, some of it is negotiation, some of it is even charity, and reaching out not just to other Muslims, but to the rest of the world in an act of solidarity, charity, and human support in the midst of a global pandemic. Another important function of hashtag Muslim Women's Day was really resisting racism and colorism. So it was also an opportunity for minority voices like, for example, Latino and Black Muslim women to use this particular event, Muslim Women's Day, to raise their own voices. For example, they started to use things like, Black spirituality is the Muslim revolution. The Muslim women are trending, but some of us are still invisible. So they started to use this opportunity of Muslim Women's Day to say, we are there, we should be equally visible. Just because we are brown or Black, we should not be excluded or invisible. Our voices and identities deserve to be equally heard and seen. Now let's move to the third function, which is the function of extending solidarity and support, the gated online communities. How some Muslim women also use the digital spaces for a third function, which is creating support for other Muslim women and giving them the kind of emotional, nurturing, and support and religious solidarity which they need online. One example is the closed Facebook group called Surviving Hijab. So I really joined this group out of curiosity because I found the title itself, Surviving Hijab, to be very interesting. What does that mean? And it turns out that the group really is a group to provide support and solidarity for women who have just decided to wear the hijab, but may be struggling with this decision, women who took off the hijab, but they want to come back to it and wear it again, or women who are hesitant to wear the hijab in the first place, to help them to overcome their own fears and to overcome their own doubts about it. So you see a lot of celebratory language, like, a woman says, I am a convert, I'm a German woman who just embraced Islam and decided to wear the hijab against all odds. And then, people say things like, oh, mabruk, congratulations, inshallah, God will bless you and make it easy for you, hang in there. So it is this area or space for these women to provide a community of support and solidarity for each other in a beautiful way online. There are also monthly sisters halaqa online. Halaqa, of course, in Arabic means the study circle or study group, where women get together online in order to study the Quran and study Islamic text and watch different religious sermons and lessons and nurture and increase each other's religious knowledge. There is also the group Muslim American Women in Media, which is a closed Facebook group of young American Muslim women professionals who want to work in the field of media. Some of them are more professional and already senior in this field, while others are younger and they really want to enter the field of media and communication, but they need help and guidance and advice. So that's what this group is for. It provides professional advice, guidance, resources, and networking to help those women who want to enter the field of media and communication in the United States. It is really a unique, interesting group online. There is also Muslim Moms of Maryland, which is another closed Facebook group, which really provides help and solidarity and support for Muslim women who have young children in Maryland. And I found that to be very interesting because we're talking here about an element of local identity, right? So it's a very localized thing. We've been talking about global identities, but we should not forget the local identities as well. Oh, I want to find help with finding a good nanny for my children, a nanny who is a Muslim nanny, or finding a good Quran school or Quran teachers and tutors for my own children. Where is the closest halal store so I can buy halal food? It is very much their everyday lives, interests, what they need, what they want, and they provide this kind of help and solidarity to each other through this closed Facebook group, Muslim Women or Muslim Moms of Maryland. There's also Muslim Sisters United. This is yet another closed Facebook group, which is more generationally and locally specific. It describes itself as an organization for young Muslim sisters, those who are 12 years and up, who would like to engage in community charity work in Montgomery County, Maryland. So really very young, Muslim girls who said, we want to do something to help our community, provide charity, and provide charity even outside of the Muslim community, especially in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic and its aftermath. So here again, the focus is on specific age groups, specific geographic locations to help to maximize the benefit of the group and to enhance collaboration and solidarity and coordination between its members. This is indicative of a very important thing, which is really the importance of charity and philanthropy in Muslim communities, especially American Muslim community in that particular case, because that was the subject of my study. In the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, they started to really put their faith in action and to really stretch out and reach out, not just to Muslim communities, but to non-Muslim neighbors and communities at large to provide them with the needed help and support. And while cyberspace has certainly played an important role in terms of enhancing and expanding globalization, all of the previous identities we talked about are globalized, global identities. It's also very important to pay attention to localization, to what is happening at the local level, right? In the particular state, in the particular county. This is sometimes it's overlooked, it's understudied, but we need to give it a lot more attention. The layers of identity markers and their segmentation and division into categories and subcategories based on geographic location coupled with other factors such as motherhood, marital status, age, profession, reveals how this growing phenomena of creating mini virtual ummas in cyberspace plays different roles and serves multiple functions for different groups of Muslims online. Again, it's not one size fits all, and we should look at the macro picture and the micro picture as well. There's also the group called Islam Way Sisters, and this is a discussion forum which provides a gender-based platform exclusively for Muslim women to exchange religious and social experiences and advice in a safe space and a gated online community. In most threads, participants were in total agreement and the consensus was based on their own emotions rather than what Habermas calls the rational critical debate or deliberation. And debates were overwhelmingly consensual because of the salience of the discussed issues and the religious and social identity of the participants. Most of the threads showed collectivism and consensus around social issues in the context of quote-unquote an Islamic sisterhood online. And it provides a good example of a gendered online community which exemplifies Islamic feminism in cyberspace, Some of the discussed issues included things like the challenges of being a new convert to Islam and adapting to the new Islamic or Muslim way of life, the skills needed to successfully adjust in an intercultural marriage, as well as the difficulty of finding and keeping a good Muslim husband. So as you can see, very socially, religiously, everyday-based issues, which these women were able to discuss together safely in a safe space, in a sisterhood kind of community online. And this is really one of the things I discussed together with my co-author in our book, Islam.com, that I referred to earlier. We talked about three main websites. The first one is islamonline.net. You can see it here on the screen. And this has platforms and has discussions in different languages. The second one is the islamway.com, which has the Islam Way Sisters discussion forum that we just talked about now. And it has the platform and the discussion forum in two languages, in English, Islam Way Sisters, as well as in Arabic, Akhawat Tariq al-Islam. So they have also the Arabic platform. And then there is the amrkhalid.net, which was the third website that myself and my co-author discussed in our book, Islam.com. So what does that all tell us? Concluding remarks. The findings of all of these studies revealed that Muslim women engage in Islamic feminism when they effectively exercise their agency online and utilize the opportunities made possible in cyberspace to resist misrepresentation, stereotyping, profiling, and marginalization, express their unique and varied identities, some of which are hybrid identities, and also create solidarity and support for each other online. However, this is never a one-size-fits-all phenomena. Rather, it varies based on various temporal and spatial and demographic factors. Social media could be a double-edged sword when it comes to Islamophobia. It provides platforms for the spread of Islamophobia and also tools to counter Islamophobia at the same time. The internet is a necessary but insufficient tool. When it comes to supporting Muslim women's causes, it can increase their visibility, amplify their voices, and act as a catalyst for desired change, as a supplementary and complementary tool, but it cannot be a replacement for on-the-ground organization and other forms of in-person mobilization in everyday life. In other words, I always tell my students, the internet is not a magical tool. It cannot bring about change, transformation all by itself. It has to be the activists or the journalists or the women on the ground who bring about this change whenever they decide to do so and however they decide to do so. This compels us to adopt the middle ground of cyber realism, which avoids the two undesirable extremes of cyber optimism or cyber pessimism, which either overestimate or underestimate the significance of the internet and social media's role. In other words, we have to talk about this middle space or middle sphere where we are not falling in the trap of technological determinism, that social media is going to be the end all be all, or dismiss and brush off social media and new media as irrelevant. We have to be realistic about it and be in the middle. Likewise, it's important to adopt a balanced and realistic approach when evaluating the phenomena of Muslim women's gendered activism in general and their online activism in particular, by acknowledging both the contributions and the limitations of the phenomena of cyber feminism, right? A lot has been achieved, but much more remains to be done. So we don't want to be like overly, optimistic and very much euphoric, or we don't want to be also dismissing all of that and brushing it aside. We also want to be realistic about the strengths and weaknesses, advantages, disadvantages, and limitations of this phenomena of cyber feminism at the same time. The findings of this study clearly illustrate a unique amalgamation of multidimensional activities in cyberspace, signaling both the complexity and hybridity of these new digitalized mediated spaces on one hand, as well as the identities and agencies competing within them on the other hand. These feminist positions of in-betweenness and hybridity in cyberspace cross-cuts the boundaries between localization and globalization, tradition and modernity, the online and the offline, the private and the public, the national and the international, the social and the political, and the secular and the religious. It is safe to predict that the push and pull dynamics and mechanisms within and between these various domains will continue to shape and reflect Muslim women's complex realities, shifting identities, and hybrid narratives within the equally dynamic and hybrid world of cyberspace. With that, I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.